Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt here with Louis D'Souza and Uohna Thiessen. Today is Monday, May the 18th, 2020, 4 p.m. New York time, and wherever you are in the world, thank you for joining us for another episode of LOA Today, your daily dose of happy. And we're happy to get this week started, continuing kind of a trend we've been doing since Uohna came on the show of exploring some of the scientific side of LOA and positive psychology and so forth. In fact, I don't know if you were aware, we actually kind of expanded a little further last Thursday because I had a special guest on from the University of Maryland who is a researcher into placebo, nocebo, and she's doing a study right now with those two regarding COVID.
Oh, really?
So,
right.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you were trying to get one of them.
And I did get her. It was quite an interesting appearance that she made. So obviously she couldn't talk about the study, but she gave us some of her views and some of her experience with placebo and nocebo, and it was fascinating stuff. And I promised her I'm going to get her back when she's done with her study. I mean, she won't be able to get away from me. That's all there is.
Did you say give a time? Like when they hope to get?
No. I mean,
it probably won't be for this pandemic. For the next pandemic,
it'll be for the 2030 pandemic.
Right.
No, I think it'll probably be before that, but
okay.
we won't rush them. But just the fact that they're doing it at all, I think is great.
Yes.
So it'll be very interesting to see what happens. But you came up with a topic for today, which I believe is based on the work of a woman named Carol Dweck. Is that correct?
Yep, that's her name.
Growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And
she reminds me of the character. I shouldn't say this is going public, but. The Untouchables, the cute little lady scientist who has the accent, and she says, "Hello, dear. When are you going to come see?" Do you remember the guys? I guess you guys didn't see the Untouchables.
I don't know that particular one now.
But anyway, she's got the cute bob and she talks with a cute accent, so it's just very cute.
Ask Alex King. She's our resident movie and TV expert. She knows all of it. So.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah. I'm sure she does. But yeah, that was the work of Carol Dweck. Developing these two terminologies and popularizing them. Mm-hmm. And now it's taking over education and sports and business and all other related fields.
Well, also the term is one that we use in LOA too, so that's what makes it a nice overlap.
Yeah, definitely.
Your mindset makes a huge difference in terms of how you feel about what's going on day to day in your life.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about Louis' haircut? About the fact that he's not wearing glasses? Mindset makes a huge difference, Louis.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
By the way, I do like the look. He was telling us before the show that his daughter had cut his hair, and she did a great job. So
she did a great job.
12-year-old and a 4-year-old both giving it a hack.
Wow.
At the same time. Whoa.
He's a brave man.
That's a dedicated father, I tell you.
These are brave times.
That's true.
There's a lot of new things coming out of this.
Oh, yes, indeed.
No doubt. So, okay, well, let's define some terms here. So growth mindset versus fixed mindset. What's that all about?
Right. So Carol Dweck, Dr. Dweck, she had been a researcher in the field of achievement and success for several decades, maybe about 10 years by the time when it first came out. And one of the things that she wanted to understand was why there were some people who were successful and there were others who were just as talented or even more talented, but were not as successful. And she was trying to figure that out and understand that. And so she proposed that it all has to do with mindsets. And so she started studying this more with students. First, she did a lot of research with students, in particular in the area of mathematics. And what she learned was that performance in mathematics has a lot to do with students' mindset. And she was able to show the difference in performance, not just at the time, but how, because below, I think grade 7, there's not much of a difference. But as they go into high school and the higher grades, those with the growth mindset, even if they start off at a deficit, tend to outperform those with the fixed mindset, which is so very fascinating.
So
And
growth versus fixed is measured in terms of performance on tests?
no, she was able to classify them as such, but then she studied, the characteristics more, and she recognized that there were some features that were common with those with the growth mindset versus those with the fixed mindset. And the idea is that those with the fixed mindset, they believe that their abilities and their skill level is fixed. They're born with a certain competency in an area, and that's it. So either they're smart and that's it, or they're not so smart as far as math is concerned, and there's nothing they can do about it. And these was a fixed mindset. They tended to shy away from challenges and to avoid difficult, challenging situations because they felt that it would either reveal deficiencies that they were not wanting to be revealed, or that it would just be, upsetting and frustrating for them. Whereas those with the growth mindset, they actually they loved the challenge, and she has this story she tells about the first time she gave a group of students a particular math challenge, and it was, above their grade level, so it was a little difficult, and there were students who were saying, we don't know how to do this, nobody ever thought us about how to do this. Whereas there were students who were saying, oh man, I love this, I love a challenge. And some kid said something like, oh, I was hoping this would be rewarding, or something to that effect, right? Because what the growth mindset understands is that when you faced with a challenge, even if you fail, you are going to learn. Whereas the fixed mindset students, they try to avoid failure or difficulty at all costs. And so those are the two main groups that the students are divided into. But
so as you're describing those, I'll tell you, the first impulse that came to my mind was it sounded like the kids who were in the growth mindset were kids who loved the subject. They were just in love with it. They couldn't do enough of it. Whereas the kids who were in the fixed mindset, they didn't sound like they loved it very much. They sounded like they almost like had to be there more than anything else.
Well, that may be true, but what she found was that this tended to transcend subjects. It was not just with math. She started off studying math, but
I mean, you could do the same rule with any subject, I would think.
Right. So the fixed mindset students didn't like challenge in any subject, even the subjects that they liked, because what they wanted was problems that they already knew how to solve, that they were comfortable with. That's the idea of the fixed mindset. They don't want to be challenged any more than they feel comfortable with. And that's one of the things. And it's kind of like, she actually, gone on to do a lot of studies. And one of the things that they've done is neuroscience in terms of studying the brains of these students. And there's a distinct difference in the brains of these students, where in the growth mindset, when they're faced with a challenge, there are certain areas of their brain, particularly those involved in recognizing an error, a mistake, a failure. Those brain cells, the brain lights up and it comes alive. It's like, lots of activities going on. Whereas with the fixed mindset, the kids tended to have a shutdown in their brain. It's like, they kind of just turned off their brain as far as, trying to figure out what was going on is concerned.
So she's actually saying that kids with a fixed mindset never really got good at stuff, even when they loved the stuff.
Right, because so the fixed mindset is the idea that they got to a certain level of competency and they wanted to stay there, because here's the thing, that one of the things that kind of fosters the mindset, it depends on the feedback they get from their either teachers or parents. And Dr. Dweck talks about how feedback can be so critical. So if you praise a student for being smart or being quick, it's easier for them. It's more likely they'll develop a fixed mindset as a result. Whereas if you praise them for the effort, for the process, for their perseverance, then they're more likely to have a growth mindset. So if you say, oh, honey, you did that so quickly, you must be so smart, kids can sometimes interpret that as if I didn't do it as quickly, I'm not smart. Whereas if you saw them, you praise for the process, not for the outcome. And so that tends to kind of influence the mindset. So some students grow up with the idea that they are naturally smart, and any situation that would make them look otherwise, they avoid. So these are the students who will tend to sometimes cheat or do things dishonestly, or they will just give up or avoid or quit a subject if it's making them feel or not as smart, or they think others are perceiving them as not as smart. Because fixed mindset think that hard work is bad. Hard work and effort is bad, because if you are smart, everything comes naturally and easily for you.
Okay. What you were describing, you included a phrase that kind of made me think this was all kind of coming from one place, because you talked about parents and teachers giving feedback. And when you said that, what that sounded to me like was students who are being educated within a more traditional educational structure with the typical classroom. The parent, I'm sorry, the teacher is at the front, and they're coming up with curriculum, and the students are being led through all that. And I can certainly see how there would be students who would come through that who might be described as having a fixed mindset. The question that's in my mind about it, though, having some experience with Sudbury type schools, is when kids basically are left to pursue whatever paths they want to pursue, regardless of what a teacher or a parent has in mind, they can end up going in a direction that the parent or the teacher didn't have any clue they were going to go into. And they can actually end up developing a passion in a way that, they keep moving along until they are done moving through it, until they've gotten out of it what they want to get out of it. And that leads to the second thing that I heard in what you described, because I may have misinterpreted. So if I misinterpreted, forgive me, but it sounded like the measurement of how much a student was learning and how much they were enjoying it was based on how much hard work they were willing to put into it, and how I guess it was measured by how well they did on tests. That's kind of what I'm inferring here. Am I missing this?
So no, they're not. That's one of the things the fixed mindset, this whole mindset tries to avoid, is the outcome. It's
Okay.
focusing on the process. So it's not so much what grade they get. In fact,
So how was it measured?
well, there have, like I said, they do the brain scan, that's part of it, but there are other written tests that they can do. They do a lot of different things. For example, one of the studies they did was they gave students some challenges, and then they asked them, would you like to have a more difficult challenge, or you want something easier? Growth mindsets usually want more difficult. Fixed mindset wants easier. And that's just one of the tests. They do things like there's a math game that Dr. Dweck developed with programmers, and the algorithm is set up such that they are rewarded for the effort, not the correct answers. In fact, if you go through the game and you get all correct answers, you'll get a response. Sorry, you didn't score anything. Maybe we underestimated your ability, and we'll give you a more difficult challenge next time. But if you went through the process, you worked through it, you failed, you learned, you tried different things, you're rewarded and you get points for that. But I want to mention one of the things that is fundamental to this idea of growth mindset and fixed mindset. What Dr. Dweck has been able to do is she's been able to combine the neuroscience of plasticity with the psychology. And when she teaches students about the fixed mindset and the growth mindset, she shows them that when they are learning something, their neurons are actually reaching out and making new connections. And the more that they try, the harder they work, the more effort they put into it, the stronger those connections become. And so she's essentially telling them that you may not have the connections in place right now to be, good at math, but you can actually develop that. And what she's gotten them to understand is that when you are working hard and you're struggling, you have to think about your neurons are firing and they're making connections, and these connections are being set in place, and they're getting stronger. And so you're actually increasing the density of the neurons in your brain. And she's done studies with other collaborators where she's shown that as far as growth mindset and fixed mindset are concerned, the students who, the IQ of growth mindset students can actually go up after, a couple of years, whereas the fixed mindset students, their IQ goes down, and that is correlated with the intensity of the neurons in certain areas of the brain. So the growth mindset students get more neurons with more branches, whereas the fixed mindset students, they actually lose neurons, and then the neurons they do have actually have less branches. So when students are made to understand that, they are more willing to then embrace the growth mindset, and it improves their performance. And this is something that is now companies, businesses are trying to embrace and share with their company. Dr. Dweck has a lovely, she has several TED Talks, of course, but she has a interview she did at Microsoft because they were wanting to incorporate a culture of growth mindset at their company.
I see. Okay. So, okay, we've got at least a flavor of what it's all about. Louis, you've been listening very quietly and very patiently. Before I even tried to throw in any of my stuff, what do you think? Where are you sitting as you're hearing all this, and how is it affecting your thought process? What are your thoughts?
Quite a few thoughts are going through my mind. So one of them is my own experience with the whole thing. I remember when I was a kid, I was very much somebody who didn't like emotional conflict. I resisted it big time. And now I really don't mind emotional conflict in the slightest. It really doesn't bother me at all. And it is a huge transformation. And one from what I see with this study is, I was not used to the idea that, well, I didn't like the idea or how people looked at me. I was worried that they would look badly on me or nicely on me or otherwise on me. And I was quite invested in other people's opinions. So I was in the position where I very strongly and almost completely hamstrung myself. And it was interesting because it took me years and years and years to get to the place where I really don't care anything what other people say. And it's a beautiful place to be. It's very empowering. And people think you're rude, abrupt, direct, and they give you a whole lot of other titles. Instead of often, not always, sometimes it is just blatantly that, but instead of giving you the title of confident.
That's an interesting thing too about confidence, because one person's confident can be another person's, hey, get out of my nose.
Yeah.
And I do come across extremely confidently, and I do get the reaction sometimes of, you've been rude, direct, or abrupt. What did somebody say to me today? They said that it was rude. Yeah, they said it was rude to do it this way. And I said, well, I think it would be rude not to do it that way. and it completely opened a completely new discussion where they started to see my point of view, and they started to focus on what they wanted and not what they didn't want.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting because it does grate a lot of people who aren't used to confident people. It's just the way it is. And, I've come to just live with it because it is what it is. I'm not going to downgrade my confidence levels just so somebody else doesn't feel hurt. You've got to control your own hurt. But I do like her study, because her study points to, in the LOA arena, something like looking at where you're at, which Abrams says a lot of the time is you're just going to get more of where you're at if you focus where you're at. But if you focus on what you want, you're going to be able to move forward to get to where you want to be. So, that's what I'm kind of seeing they're getting to. And they're also pointing to the very important LOA principle, is the importance of negativity, the importance, which I know Uohna will love, of struggling and all those kind of things. So, understanding that, appreciating that is the expansion point. That is what makes you strive for something better. And I can see that, I can see myself actually going through both phases of a study. One phase where I was stunted and wouldn't grow, and the other phase where I am now, which is I'm just leaping and bounding forward, where I'm really enjoying it. So it's not that one person is locked into it, I don't think.
Right.
Which the study seems to infer.
No, that's one of the things they try to, Dr. Dweck is always careful to mention that the terms actually may contradict the actual teachings, because when you say fixed, you're implying that it's unchangeable, but that's not actually what it is. It means because a fixed mindset person can grow and become a growth mindset person. So kind of a misnomer.
Otherwise the big companies probably wouldn't want it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so, but now the name is stuck, so she can't do anything about that.
Be very careful what you wish for when you put your category names together. Yes,
but I wanted to say something about what Louis was saying, because this is one of the things that Dr. Dweck mentions a lot when she talks about, in the 70s and so on, we placed an emphasis on the whole idea of self-esteem. And so parents were going around praising their children, unabashedly, just praising them for every little thing. You're such a good boy. Look how great you did. And that backfired, because what happened is these children grew up thinking that their self-worth was based on them performing well all the time. And if they didn't, and I'm being extreme, it's not always the case, but if they didn't perform well, then they're not as worthy or valuable. And that had the opposite effect. Instead of building their self-esteem, it actually lowered their self-esteem. And so she's cautioning parents these days to be careful about how you praise your children. And you should be emphasizing their effort and their process and their perseverance and their hard work and their effort, and less focus on the actual outcome, because the whole idea is to build them up. So when they're learning something or going through whatever it is they're going through, it's what's happening in them. Who are they becoming as a result? So if they're doing math and it's hard and they're failing, it's not so much about the grade that's important, and ultimately maybe they will decide to pursue it, but it's about the fact that they're putting in the effort. And I know that personally. I used to teach high school math at one time, and you always got the question of, how am I ever going to use this in my life in the future?
A lot of people wondered that one.
Always that question. But I had to emphasize to my students, it's not so much about the subject in particular, but it was the effort that you were putting into this subject, the growth that was happening to you intellectually and emotionally, and on so many different levels that you could then transfer into other areas of your life. It's about the discipline of it. So it wasn't so much about the subject, even because, they were like, I'm going to be a dancer or some other thing where they thought they will never have to use math. And although I didn't think that was true, I just told them, well, that may be true, but putting in the effort here to study and understand and learn is going to make you a better learner in any area that you choose to pursue. So that's something that's important in the growth mindset, because growth mindset children tend to have higher self-esteem because they realize that their value is not based on a grade or some kind of award or something.
Yeah, I've never really been much of a fan of praising people for every little thing that they're doing in a controlled academic environment. I always thought that was kind of crazy. I didn't have a scientific study to back me. It was just more like, that just didn't ring true to me.
Yeah.
What rings more true to me is celebrating what they think of as their victories, which I guess is kind of in line with what Dweck is saying. So if and this isn't just with children, this is with anybody. If I see somebody who, they've been dealing with something, whether or not they've considered it a struggle, just that they've been dealing with it, and they have some kind of a breakthrough from their own perspective, I say, good for you, way to go. Because it's not that I'm trying to reward them for having done well. It's my way of recognizing, congratulations, you've discovered more about yourself. This is
Yes,
a great
yeah.
thing.
So
This
that's
this
the
is a
idea.
wonderful thing. And I've always found that to be a more effective approach than praising grades and all that. That just seemed kind of silly.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
idea is to praise them for a process that, like, what did you learn? How did you, what did you try? How did it work? I mean, I'm so proud of you taking the time to, go through this. So that's the kind of thing. The other thing I wanted to talk about, what Louis mentioned was, and I just forgot what it was. So there was the self-esteem. Oh, this was not specifically, but just so the thing with what Dr. Dweck has postulated, that as far as this growth mindset, fixed mindset is concerned, it is a spectrum, of course. There's some people who are more growth mindset oriented than others. And what she also says is that if you are far on the left in terms of the fixed mindset, it doesn't mean that you are fixed in everything that you do. So there might be one or two areas of your life where you have a growth mindset, but there are other areas that are that's not even an option for you to think about venture into learning more and growing as far as that is concerned. So the other extreme is where the person has a growth mindset in all areas of their lives. And so she has given some guidelines to help move us along to incorporate more of a growth mindset in other areas of our life that we would not normally practice.
Mm-hmm. We have a couple of comments in the live stream from Josie, who is actually going to be joining us on the show tomorrow to read some poetry.
Awesome.
It's going to be fun. But Josie, first of all, she observes that a growth mindset sounds to her more of what Gary Zukav would consider part of the multi-sensory personality. I don't know if you have any familiarity with Gary Zukav.
I know what the multi-sensory.
Okay. Does that correlation make sense to you?
The multi-sensory personality, it involves using sensory skills outside of the five senses. So, she's in the opposite of that is people who only operate in the material world, only what they can see and hear and feel and touch, whereas the multisensory goes beyond that. It's in the immaterial world, and he encourages us to live there more, because that's where there's more happiness and joy and peace and love and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Praise the source.
Yes.
That's right. Yes. And then she also has a question for both of you, actually. Based on your research, Uohna, what are your thoughts on the impact of color on the human psyche?
Are we talking about race, or are we talking about black, white, blue, and yellow? And
it's an open question because that's what she wrote. So you can interpret it what way that makes sense to you.
Yes. Well, I know that color does have an impact. I incorporate a lot of color in my life. I love colors. You see, I'm wearing my bright yellow sweater today.
Very attractive.
I want to mention specifically that a lot of research has been done on the color green in terms of.
Is that why you have a green background? I have to ask.
Right, because it helps calm the mind. It actually puts the mind in a kind of almost in that kind of alpha zone. So they recommend that people who are depressed or anxious or have other kinds of suffering mental issues, that they go out in nature where there's a lot of trees and a lot of green. It actually helps to calm the anxiety and make them feel better. So there's that.
I do know that psychologically, a lot of colors have been studied over the years, both formal psychology and informal in terms of art departments and so forth. Certain colors are described as warm, others
Right.
described as cool. Some are hot, some are dark, some are light. I mean, there's a wide variety of adjectives and in some cases adverbs applied to color. And uh, I mean, anybody who's ever painted a room or, like you said, going out into nature or bought clothing or whatever has kind of dealt with that. That's just part
Yep,
of,
yep, yep,
you
yep.
know, when we're dealing, if we have eyesight, if we have the ability to discern color, we take color into account. And in fact, I have found that when you look at where people live, the rooms that they're in and so forth, very often, not always, but very often, the rooms reflect where they're at in
Hmm.
terms of the color.
Yes.
People who live in brightly lit rooms tend to be brightly lit people, so to speak.
Right, right.
People who live in dark rooms tend to be darker people. And you know, I mean, you can kind of generalize any way you want to, but I've seen that pattern a lot. In fact,
Yeah.
it makes me think I really think that Louise and I need to change our color scheme a little bit.
Well, except with teenagers, right? That you can't follow that rule too strictly because they sometimes wants to paint their room purple or black or some kind of
Hmm.
to
Well, you know, they go through a goth
experiment.
stage, so you know it's
Yeah,
understandable. But you see color a lot. Color plays a major
yeah.
role in life.
And you
And
know, if you think about it, each color has a particular position on the electromagnetic spectrum, and it has a
mhm.
particular wavelength associated with these colors, and so that's going to have different effect. And you know, I read a study a long time ago where they were, you know, there's the whole idea that, and I forgot exactly how it goes, but when you see yellow, it's because you are actually subtracting all the other colors, you know, on the of the rainbow, and I can't
Yeah.
remember the details, but
In
it was
fact, I
quite
believe yellow is additive because think of the way a television screen is put together. Television
right.
screens are actually blue, red, and green,
Hmm.
and that combination, depending on how you light them up, will actually create a yellow.
Right.
Interesting point, though. Yellow is the hardest color to create on a television screen.
Oh, really?
It really
Okay.
is. Yeah. In fact, that's kind of like a cue if you want to not to make people do this anymore, but if you're getting a computer monitor or a TV or something like that, and you want to try to judge which one has the best picture, have them throw yellow up on the screen. If
Yellow.
everyone does the yellow best, that's probably
Oh,
going to be the best picture.
interesting. I had
I
no
must have a
idea.
very good monitor. You look a lovely yellow
Yellow. You
jumper
can call it yellow.
there.
Yeah, I did this just to test your monitor.
Josephine, I wanted to invite you. Come on our show as well. Come on, be a fourth person there. It'd be good to have you.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Well, she's going to read some of her poetry, and she actually has mentioned this before, both in private messages and in the live stream chats, that she listens to our show on various days and uses it as inspiration for what she writes in her poetry.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
I'm almost like a little bit hesitant to find out what she's going to read tomorrow. You know, I'm like, oh, what secrets will she reveal?
I'm sure it'll be beautiful.
Nah, it should be good. But it's going to be fun. It's going to be
Yes.
interesting to see what her poetry is a perspective thing. I mean, we talk about perspective a lot.
Use
I
it and
mean,
lose it.
well, true, yeah. And I mean, here we are. We're talking about growth and fixed mindset. Well, that's
Exactly.
perspective. You know, it's
Yep.
totally about perspective.
That's totally about perspective, right? Because as Louis mentioned, that's the whole idea. If
Yeah.
you don't use your resources, your brain cells, your muscles, whatever, they actually deteriorate. But the more that you engage them, they grow and they flourish, and it makes, you know, Dr. In that course, The Science of Wellness, she has a whole section dealing with this exact topic,
Does she? Okay.
growth mindset versus fixed mindset, because she's sharing with the college students that you know when they, of course, with college students, grades are like a big deal.
Oh, especially at
And
Yale University.
right, exactly. And so it was trying to show them that she has this whole idea of miswanting and mispredicting, where we have a tendency as humans to miswant things we think will make us happy, and we mispredict certain situations or accomplishments that are going to make us happy, and that is not always the case. And she talks about grades, especially for the college students, that they think getting an A is the secret to life and bliss and all these wonderful things. But you know, she
It
reminds,
is for a short while.
right, and that's the idea. It's all based on this kind of extrinsically motivated source of happiness. Whereas if you adopt the growth mindset, you are motivated from within, the intrinsic mindset. And so it's not so much about the grade, but about how much you learn and how much you have grown over the semester or the year or whatever it happens, And she's talked about, she shared research with students who, they did a study with medical school students or pre-med students where they assessed their mindset, and then they followed them over the course of a organic chemistry class, which is one of more challenging classes for science majors. And what she found is that with these students, with the fixed mindset students, if they got a bad grade for the first test, they're more than likely going to drop the class. Whereas for the growth mindset students, if they got a bad grade, then they sought ways to help to improve. They studied harder, found a tutor, got mentors, took steps in essentially to help improve their grade and their chances of doing well in the class. And so she was encouraging the students to not just focus on the outcome, but focus on the process, because it's ultimately more rewarding in terms of their well-being.
Have you guys?
Oh, go ahead.
Have you guys ever watched the TV series Billions?
Nope.
Can't say I have. No. Again, the question for Alex. Alex is our TV movie expert.
The reason why I bring it up is because I think it's a fantastic study in mindsets, specifically how a billionaire would think and differ from the rest of us. And I'm loving it. I mean, even though the guy is probably not a billionaire, but might be fairly close now with the series. It's on the fifth series now, and I know he's acted in many other things as well.
You create a series on billions and you become a billionaire. Hey.
There you go.
But I really feel that this guy can pull off transmitting via a TV show how it feels vibrationally to be a billionaire.
Do you feel like he's doing that?
I feel he's absolutely doing it, and I'm really impressed with this, really impressed. And you get a completely different view of life. I mean, completely. He's looking at everything from a 100% different point of view than most of us are looking at it.
Okay, now I'm convinced. Really, I'm going to check this one out. I'm going to say to Louise, let's watch this tonight. See what it's about.
It's well worth. I mean, it's I think it's on about the fifth series, and there's about 12 or 15 episodes per series. So, it'll keep you going for a while. But it's really a very well developed because they've got a psychologist who's in the company as well. And the last episode who's just come out, which is 5-3 or something, she brings out such beautiful analogies, and the way she thinks is really off the board. It's off the charts. It's not like any psychologist would normally be trained, but she's got it. She's got it nailed. She gets his people up and moving and focused, and deals with all these different characters. And she's just as important in my mind as he is, but from a very different point of view. And the whole relationships that go on, and the kind of relationships he has with his wife and then with other women, etc. It's so different. It's just really, really interestingly well done. I'm seriously impressed with that.
I gotta check that one out. Okay, you got me. I mean, I think actually Alex mentioned this one, but you sold it better. So
I want to mention, because Dr. Dweck, she studies not just students, but of course athletes, as well as businessmen, CEOs and entrepreneurs and those kinds of stuff. And what she's found is that the ones who are successful, they have a growth mindset. And even if their business goes bust, they are so resilient, and they don't. In other words, their idea of them being a billionaire is not based, or whatever, being successful, is not based on the outward show that people can see, but they have developed that mindset within them. So they feel like no matter what happens, they can always get back to that place, you know? And she talks about this being important for not just individuals, but for companies, because she says that, you know, the companies that develop a growth mindset culture are more likely to succeed in the future, whereas those with a fixed mindset, you know, she says either the company is growing or the company is dying. So you get to choose where you stand. And she wants companies that you shouldn't just say your growth mindset in name. If you're going to be growth mindset, you have to really walk the talk, you know, because with growth mindset, you're not afraid of failure. You're not afraid of risk. You're not afraid of mistakes and, you know, all the hard knocks that are going to come along the way. But if you really are committed to the process, then you cannot lose. So that's
my greatest rewards in my financial life have been very risky. You know, calculated risks, but
sure,
really,
yeah, you weren't going wild. You weren't going crazy.
Tough. You're back against the wall. You know, should I do it? Shouldn't I do it? Type things, and you know, it's been incredible. They've served me so well for so long. Just taking a few risks here and there, and it's, you know, you really respect that process. You really get to, you know, this is fantastic. And that's another thing about this billionaire TV show. The guy really knows how to not take no for an answer, and how to look for the next opportunity, and how to bend things from a completely different angle. I mean, the way he did it in this last episode with this painter is absolutely fantastic. You know, once you watch how he got outwitted by another billionaire, and how he dug around and he found another way to turn it around. And the way they even put it across in the whole TV series is just brilliant. It's just absolutely, you know, completely out of the box stuff. You know?
Right, and that's the kind of mindset that we should all, you know, aspire
embrace.
To. And so you start off with smaller risk that, you know, doesn't give you panic attacks, and as you grow in your comfort zone expands, then you're able to take bigger and bigger risk and become more risk averse, as they like to say.
Right.
That's what I consider in myself. My strength in that risk area is my health.
Okay.
Because I have studied and worked and got to an incredible position with my health. I will take far greater risks now than I would ever have done. I almost don't even consider them a risk anymore.
Yep, that's what happened.
The way it must be. You know?
When you talked about extrinsic versus intrinsic, that also kind of resonated. That sounds very similar to what in LOA circles we call being in alignment or being out of alignment. People who are out of alignment tend to be looking outside of themselves for their cues on everything. How do I get to where I want to be? All that kind of stuff. Whereas people who are in alignment are looking internally. And so I just wanted to point out, it sounds very similar.
Yeah. And the other thing that is important to understand, especially for the world of LOA, is the emphasis not so much on the things you're trying to attract, but on the process and the person that you are becoming as you engage in these kinds of activities, right? And you know, it goes back to the positive psychology. You're developing the neural network. You're establishing an identity as a successful person, as a millionaire, and eventually as a billionaire. But you have to, you know, there's a process involved in establishing that identity, such that then you can get to that place. And even when all of the material things are taken away, the identity remains. And so you can easily build everything back up again.
Which makes sense. I mean, anytime that we've ever heard stories about, say, some millionaire who ran into trouble and maybe, you know, they lost everything and so forth, almost invariably, if they're the ones who made the money in the first place, they didn't just inherit it.
Yes.
Within like a year, they're back to millionaire status. Yeah.
That's right.
Absolutely. And those guys who win the lottery are poor in no time.
They lose it all because they don't have that identity of being a millionaire. So their vibration,
their point of attraction is not strong enough to maintain that vibration.
Yeah, exactly.
So that vibration makes a difference.
Mhm.
which is a good thing to know. It's a good thing to apply, but it's also nice to know that neuroscience ties into it. It makes sense. I mean,
Mhm.
certainly we've talked enough. You and I, Uohna, have talked enough on this show in the past, and other co-hosts I've talked with in the more recent times about how every time that we're focused on stuff that feels good and we like and are interested in and so forth, we're building this neuron network. It's just kind of building, building, building,
Yeah,
building,
exactly.
because we're engaged in it,
That's
right?
right.
Because that's really what you're talking about there. You're
Yeah.
talking about
Yes.
engagement.
Yes. Yes. Being
You know.
engaged, and
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 then married.
and then the honeymoon. No, but
That's right.
this is one of the reasons why I embarked on this whole idea of writing a book about struggle. This
Mhm.
whole growth mindset, fixed mindset concept, because one of the tenets of the growth mindset teaching is that not only would you engage in learning and you building neuronal networks, but it is the idea of deep learning struggles that actually uh, upgrades and stabilizes those networks. And I'll give the neuroscience. So when we form neuronal connections in our brain, we have branches that reach out and touch and make synapses. But our neurons, these branches get stabilized by a sheath of myelin. There's a kind of a fatty deposit that forms around the structure. Think of it like the electrical wire. You have that insulation, so it
Mhm.
makes it stronger. And not only does it make it stronger, but it makes the connection faster. And so what they have science has understood is that people who have a particular skill in certain areas, whether it be musicians or athletes, their brains have a lot, not just connections, but a lot of insulation. In fact, in Einstein's brain, when they did the autopsy, he had a lot of that insulating material. So that makes your neural networks conductions really, really quick. And so what they found is that when you engage in that quote unquote struggle, that actually rapidly increases the process of that myelination, because what you send a signal to the brain that this is an important connection, this needs to be stabilized and made permanent and as efficient as possible. So whereas if you just casually learn something, you'll make a connection and it'll be like a footpath. But if you struggle with it, that becomes like a super highway, and you become, your skills level goes up significantly. So that's one of the things that
Mhm.
got me going along that road.
No, I think we've all had that kind of experience. I'm not sure I'd necessarily call it struggle, but I understand what you mean by it.
Yeah.
No,
It's
the initial phase is struggle. And then once you know what you don't want, the superhighway is when you're focusing on what you do want.
The
okay.
superhighway is laid in the struggle process. The struggle is what causes the superhighway to be laid. And
It's the
then
expansion point, yes.
after you've laid the superhighway, then it becomes that automatic thing that you can do without thinking about it, like how athletes operate.
Okay, well that's a perfectly acceptable way of describing it. The way I would describe it is simply in terms of engagement, and I'm not meaning necessarily the way somebody like Carol Dweck would define it, but just I mean the way people just tend to engage. And
Mhm.
I mean we've all seen it, we've all experienced it at one point or another. I'm thinking right now about the school I helped to found back in 2002, in which one of the kids who came into the school, I've told this story before, but she came in, she was in family services. She was in foster families. She was miserable. She didn't know who her father was. Her mother was kind of a bit of a mess. She was angry. She was bitter. She was on 15 different drugs to get her through stuff and so forth. She was a embittered kid of 12,
Mhm.
and basically her if you want to think of it as a diagnosis, her prognosis wasn't very good for life.
Mhm.
She was
Mhm.
looking pretty bad. She comes into our school and we're just starting out, and the school went through kind of a rocky time the first year, but it got through it. And within a very, very short period of time, measured in weeks, all of a sudden, just because of the way the structure or the lack of structure was there, she found she actually had to engage or lose the school because she liked the school, but
Mhm.
she just didn't want to be involved in any of the typical kinds of activities. Instead, she wanted to do things that were often, kind of anti-cultural, or not anti-cultural, but get herself in trouble with other people, create challenges and difficulties with others and so forth. And within a very, very short time, she found herself having to go within to resolve things, because the way the school was not structured, nobody was going to fix it for her.
Mhm.
She had to actually decide how she was going to navigate this brand new thing. And it was an amazing process to watch. I mean, she became very engaged very quickly. Um, I can't say that it was always smooth sailing for her. It wasn't always. So in that sense, I guess you could say there was some struggle going on,
Mhm.
but mainly it was about growth. The
Mhm.
growth for her was just a big, big deal.
Mhm.
And the way I always like to finish off the story is, within a few years, she'd become the school president.
Mhm.
And now she's like one of the lead spokesmen for this model of education, after coming in, as basically an antisocial, anti-student. That was where
Mhm.
she came from. She went through this huge transition, all because she just became so engaged, and she had to go within to do it. She tried. I mean, when kids come into this kind of school, they try to look to it like an authority figure or a parent or somebody. Well, you got to fix this for me, right? This is your job. You're supposed to fix this. And nobody would fix it for her. Well, she was kind of left without options. It's like, well, I guess I have to go inside and figure it out myself, because no one else is going to do it for me. And amazing things happened. So I think we all can kind of point to examples like that. That's obviously one that's more specific to my own life, but we can all point to these examples of people who have found themselves in circumstances where, for whatever reason, they go inside, they go internal. And when they do, extraordinary things happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And so I wanted to share before we go that, Dr. Dweck has these 4 kind of general guidelines to help people to incorporate more of a growth mindset into their lives. The first one, of course, is to, understand and learn about the brain plasticity that I talked
Mhm.
about. The other one is to recognize areas in our lives where we might be practicing a fixed mindset kind of attitude, and kind of challenge some of those areas so that we can move in direction, question some of the assumptions that we make about ourselves and our ability. And these may not be conscious, but you can kind of go through the day and to think about some of the things you say, oh, you know what, I was never really good at. So those kind of things, that you may say out loud, or you may think, you say, well, I don't like that because I can't do, that kind of stuff. And the fourth thing that she admonishes is to honor the struggle. It's
Mhm.
part of the journey, and growth mindset people always recognize the struggle as an opportunity for growth and development, for learning, for enhancement. And so she encourages everybody to honor that part of the learning process, because it's actually very powerful. And you mentioned the struggle that we all go through, but I wanted to add that when it comes to peak performance, exceptional performance, the more struggle is required. If you know anything about any of the greats in our world that we look up to as being the top of their field, if you study their background, you will see areas where there was immense struggle that got them to where they were. So.
Mhm. Of course, there are some times when the struggle is, this is something that I think a lot of people run into, particularly when they discover LOA, but also in other areas of life. The struggle is often trying to figure out what the next step is for whatever it is that you're doing.
Right. And that's
And
why sometimes that's why she recommends, because she talks a lot about deliberate struggle and deliberate learning and deliberate practice, which is a whole nother area of positive psychology. So instead of you just trying by yourself, you can get someone who's already been there, who's already
sure,
traveled that road, and that person can then make your struggle more directional, more focused, more meaningful, as opposed to just trying,
which is why a lot of people reach out. They ask
yeah,
for help when
yeah,
they're trying to
yeah,
figure something out and they can't
yeah.
get there.
Yeah, so a lot of sports coaches are implementing this. So they're figuring out ways to incorporate this kind of deliberate struggle into the training and practice for their athletes, so to take them to the next level, kind of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess where I was going to with the point I was starting to raise, though, is very often people can be in a place where, again, they're not really sure what the next step is, and they aren't really sure how to get where they want to get to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And now this is something that often gets brought up in LOA circles, and LOA coaches often talk in terms of, well, don't worry about the destination, just keep taking steps, your internal guidance will get you there, and so on and so forth. What I'm curious about is there something similar in the teaching of Carol Dweck that says you don't have to know everything about how to get to the destination, you simply take your steps and you'll get there?
Right. So she does talk about that, because it's the destination is actually secondary to the process, because it's about who you are becoming, the growth process that's happening. So when you when you question your assumptions, it causes you to recognize areas that you may have been avoiding, or you may have had some kind of psychological block towards. And so sometimes when you say you don't know what direction to take, it is actually because the one that you've been given a premonition to take is the one you don't want to take, kind of thing. So sometimes but having a coach and a sounding board and talking about it in the course, The Science of Wellness, as I mentioned, well-being, I keep saying wellness and it's well-being. She mentioned, of course, the values assessment test and those kinds of inquiry. So you get to find out what's important to yourself. And so she encourages people, instead of going for the job with the paycheck and the prestige and the honor, you should be focusing on one that allows you to express the things, or to be engaged in the things that you value, that are important to you, because that brings more happiness ultimately.
So kind of along the lines of what we're talking about here, I just mentioned how people ask questions in LOA circles. We have a question in the live stream that kind of mirrors both. So when you bring it in, you guys can both address it. This is from Bosco. How can we move from a mindset of lack to a mindset of abundance, especially when we're programmed from a very early age?
Yeah. It starts with gratitude. Because when you start a practice of gratitude, so you have to start appreciating what's in your life now, and what you already have, what you've already accomplished, what you've already begun. And the more you practice that, the more your identity, your being, your vibration becomes, that it expands to one of abundance, right? Because when you start a practice of gratitude, you realize just how abundant your life really already is. And that from that seed, that abundance mentality grows and expands, and then you can start, attracting more and more into your life.
Anything you want to add to that, Louis?
Well, my solution is understand the law of attraction. Because do you understand you create your own reality? Do you understand that your thoughts focus and carve where you're going to go? And if you're focusing on where you are at the moment, as Uohna was saying, you're going to get more of that. And if you appreciate what you've got, then you're going to get more appreciation, gain the law of attraction. So, the most important thing that helped me change from the more poverty mindset to the more abundant mindset was simply understanding the rules to the game of life.
It does make a difference. And when you understand how it all fits together. Yeah. I mean, what the work that Uohna is sharing with us today is sort of a different way of getting to the same place, but ultimately that's what it's about, is trying to understand, how does all this stuff work? How does it all fit together?
That's right.
So good stuff. Well, thank you very much, guys. I want to remind people who are not yet subscribed to the podcast, this is the kind of good content you get every single time. So become a subscriber. If you aren't sure how to do it, go to the homepage of our website, loatoday.net. You'll see instructions at the top of the page, and then join the hundreds of others who are also listening and tuned in every single time. And check us out on YouTube as well, because we live stream to YouTube as we're recording each day, and you can check us out there. And follow us and see us and join the live stream like Jeffrey and Josie and
Hi,
Bosco and
Jeffrey
others are
and
doing
Josie
today.
and whoever else.
She might even be reading some poetry. You never really know.
Yes.
So good stuff. So any last thought that you want to leave people with, Uohna, because this was your topic, so I'll let you do the last thought.
Just the growth mindset, it's something that is beautiful to experience. And the more you, what's the word, incorporate it into your life, the better life gets. It's just amazing.
Very good. Good stuff. All right. Well, thank you guys. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I just wanted to bring one thing up. Jeffrey has just said, have you done a show on dreams and visions? And that would be a great topic for the next one. I'd love that one.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Dreams and visions.
Thanks,
that's a good
Jeffrey.
idea. So, all right. Is that something that we can bring in the scientific perspective on?
Absolutely, because it's all about the subconscious.
Okay. All right. Well, then I think we have our topic designed for next week. Thank you, Jeffrey. We appreciate that as well.
Yes.
We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye. Okay, guys, I got to run because I have my coaching session. So I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.
Take care.